He's done it again. So Glass is directed by M. Night Shyamalan and stars Bruce Willis as David Dunn, who following the events of the first film in the series, Unbreakable, has been acting as a somewhat vigilante character with his son to keep the city safe. However, in doing this, he comes into contact with Kevin Wendell-Crumb, played by James McAvoy, and upon that two meeting, they end up in a same psychiatric ward where they are reunited with Samuel L. Jackson's Mr. Glass. Now, this movie was easily one of the films I was most looking forward to this year because Unbreakable is, in my opinion, M. Night Shyamalan's best film. I think it's absolutely incredible. And when we got Split in 2016 and it was revealed to be a sequel to Unbreakable, it was extremely, extremely exciting. And M. Night Shyamalan then coming out to say we were getting the third film in what's now known as the East Rail trilogy in 2019 in the form of Glass. I was very, very excited about that. And all the trailers for this movie look great. And just the concept, this crossover event, this, final movie in this unknown trilogy was really, really exciting. So I went into Glass with really high expectations, and I've never been so disappointed in a movie. With that, though, I will give some positives. For one, James McAvoy, once again, is absolutely tremendous in this film. I mean, if you've seen Split, you're going to get more of the same here. He's just absolutely phenomenal in this movie. The way he's able to switch to all the different personalities that he has to deal with in this film is so impressive and just entertaining to watch. Like, let's be honest, the whole reason we watched Split was because of the personality split alone. That's why we watched it, and you get a lot more of that. You get a few new personalities as well we haven't seen before. We get to see a lot more of the Beast in this, which was really interesting, although the Beast is another complaint I'll get to later. But the entire thing, just seeing James McAvoy again as Kevin Wendell-Crumb, as all these different roles, was just so exciting, and he absolutely nailed it once again. Also, the score is wonderful in this film. James Newton Howard's score is really well done here. It's just one of those scores that anytime there's music happening, it just really attracts me. And, I feel like for me, for a score to be something that I really pick up upon, it must be very, very good. Because scores sometimes just kind of, fall under the radar and I don't really notice them too much. But if I do notice it, then it must be interesting. And for me, James Newton Howard's score here for Glass was just absolutely outstanding. I loved it. Even like the end credit song, I sat through the entire end credits because the music was just so good. However, moving into the negatives for this film, I found this film just incredibly underwhelming and very, very disappointing given that this is the third film in the trilogy and how everything was built up. This movie fell completely flat. For one, Bruce Willis, I'm sorry, I don't think Bruce Willis is a good actor, I never have. I don't think he's that great in Unbreakable. He's fine in Unbreakable, but I don't think he's that great. And I don't think I've ever seen Bruce Willis give, an amazing performance. And while it was nice to have him back for this movie, it just didn't really feel like he was giving it everything he had. And but I wouldn't say Bruce Willis is ever really like that, so I don't really know what I was expecting with him. But all I'm saying is, for a movie with this kind of cast and this kind of grandeur, he really undersold it. Also, visually, this movie's just really flat. It's really boring. It's a dull movie to look at. The colours are very saturated. It doesn't look nice. It's not an attractive movie in comparison to Split, which, I think the color grading and the color correction in that movie is really poppy. In this movie, it's just incredibly flat. It reminded me a lot of a Marvel movie. The Marvel Cinematic Universe movies look quite flat in comparison to other films, and it kind of reminded me of that. It was very much in the same way in regards to its color grading and color correction, which I think just really puts me off, especially watching this movie on a big screen. I watched this in IMAX, and it was just really obvious that this movie just didn't have the correct colors to make it as poppy as it could have been. And as I mentioned earlier, while James McAvoy is amazing in this movie, his performance is great, and I loved all the personalities once again, especially seeing characters like Dennis, Patricia, of course Hedwig. There's so many great characters that he gets to play. The Beast is reintroduced in this film, and obviously the Beast was the big build-up from Split. That's what everything was building towards in that movie, was seeing the Beast. And the Beast in this movie is completely different to what he was in Split, because in Split he was just this super strong character who could climb on walls and, was super strong. In this movie, he's kind of this animalistic cross between a human and creature. And I didn't like that, because that's not what the Beast was. The Beast was just a super strong personality who could also climb on walls. He was just an incredibly strong character. Whereas in this, he's growling like an animal, and it came across very silly and very different, and again, very unfaithful to what Split did. And I know in pretty much every Split review, or every Glass review even that you've seen, in every single Glass review you've watched online or read, you would have seen the third act and the ending being brought up. And obviously I'm not going to talk about the ending, I'm not going to talk about the third act, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, because I definitely feel like you should definitely experience it for yourself. But I have to agree with the majority of people in saying that the third act and the ending is incredibly underwhelming. And again, I'm not going to go into detail, I'm not going to go into spoilers, but what I will say is that I felt personally it completely went against everything Unbreakable and Split set up and established and stood for. And with that, again, as a huge fan of these two movies, I was incredibly excited for Glass, and the fact it was able to so heavily, in a way, disrespect its previous two films, it felt incredibly underwhelming, and I really didn't like the way they handled it, the way they ended it. It's just, for me, I walked out of this film, because you really have to nail your third act on a film, especially even if you have like the first two acts, which are a bit rough. As long as you stick the landing, people will come out with a fairly positive reaction. But if you really balls up the third act like this movie does, you're going to come out with a really negative reaction. And that's the way I felt coming out of Glass. Honestly, I feel like I've lost faith in M. Night Shyamalan. I really felt like he was really gaining his ground back. I think, especially after stuff like The Visit and Split, I really felt like, okay, this is him coming back. He's finding his feet again, and he's finding his place within the film industry once again. And I was really excited about Glass, and I really felt Glass was going to be great. But I think, honestly, M. Night Shyamalan is a director who can't get out of his own way sometimes, and he just can't let something go. He'll have this idea, and he will keep pushing it, he will keep doing it, whether it's good or bad, just until he can get his vision on, which in some ways is respectful, but in other ways I feel like, sometimes you have to take a step back and look at what you're doing and look at what you're producing, and if it's not quality, then maybe, just dial it back. And I feel like that's maybe what you should have done with Glass. Instead of rushing out this sequel, I'm not saying it was rushed, but, it's pumping this movie out in about 2 years was very evident, especially because the budget of this film was very, very low. It was around $20 million on a budget, which is very evident as the film goes on because the special effects are not exactly the best. The camera work is also a bit of a weird one. And along with that, they're building to this massive third act. And again, I won't go into what the third act is, but they build up to this third act where there's going to be this big battle in this big tower. And it never happens. And you can see that that's clearly because they did not have the budget to stretch to that. And all of these things combined have just made me lose faith in M. Night Shyamalan, which is something I never wanted to say. Overall, I think Glass is one of the most disappointing movies I've seen in a very long time. Especially because I'm such a huge fan of Unbreakable, I'm such a huge fan of Split. And, given the fact this was the third movie in this trilogy, I was very, very excited. And I don't want to come across as this super negative person who is just hating on this movie, because I don't want to be like that. I'm not that sort of person. But I have to say how I feel and how I felt coming out of this film. And like I say, I really did not enjoy what this movie did and where it went and how it ended. I just didn't appreciate it because it felt incredibly unfaithful and incredibly different to what Split and Unbreakable established all those years ago. And because of that, it made me feel a bit empty and a bit lost and a little bit angry that this movie went in the direction it did. And I can't escape that. I can't escape the fact that this movie really let me down. And with that, although I think the movie does have some strong elements, like I say, James McAvoy is absolutely fantastic in this movie, and the score is really mesmerizing at times. But for me, just as a huge fan of these two films, I think that was a detriment to this film, was not being able to live up to what these two built up and not being able to stick the landing for this trilogy. I feel like as a general audience member who perhaps is not necessarily a big fan of Unbreakable, maybe he's not even seen Unbreakable, they might be alright with where this movie goes. They might even be blown away by how this movie goes. I honestly don't know, but as a fan of these two, it just didn't stick up the landing at all. So have you guys seen Glass? If you have, make sure you let me know all your thoughts about it in the comment section down below. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this movie. And as always, guys, if you want to see more movie reviews from me, be sure to subscribe. And I hope to see you guys again in my next video.